My name is Tessa Whitlock, I'm 34 years old. And the first weekend I spent in the lake house I'd worked 12 years to afford. My sister called at exactly 8:17 on Saturday morning with a smile in her voice I couldn't see but somehow already distrusted. She said, "Good news. We finally sold our house." I congratulated her before she added the sentence that still echoes every time I unlock my front door. "Since we're between places, you owe us a room until we figure things out." I looked across the living room at the sunrise reflecting over Lake Coeur d'Alene in northern Idaho. The same view I'd imagined through every overtime shift. Every skipped vacation, every birthday I quietly worked through. Then I looked at my boyfriend, Nolan. He didn't say a word. He just stared into his coffee like he'd been expecting that phone call all along. That's when my stomach dropped. My sister wasn't asking. She was announcing a decision someone had already made without me. I smiled anyway and told her to come the following afternoon. After we hung up, I spent the next 6 hours doing something that would eventually change every single thing that happened afterward. If you've ever had someone treat your biggest dream like it belonged to them, you already know this feeling. 12 years earlier I'd started my career as a forensic financial analyst in Seattle, spending my days uncovering hidden assets and tracing money people desperately wanted to keep invisible. My job taught me one lesson better than any classroom ever could. People rarely steal with force. They steal by making you believe saying no makes you selfish. That's the mistake I'd stopped making at work years ago. I just hadn't realized I was still making it with my own family. By Sunday afternoon, 3 SUVs were already pulling into my driveway. And before anyone even knocked on the door, I noticed something in the back of the last vehicle that made my heartbeat stop when I opened the front door the next afternoon. My younger sister, Bryn Whitlock, wrapped me in the kind of hug that lasts just long enough to distract you from what's happening behind your back. While she kept talking about how stressful moving had been, her husband, Carter, and their 2 teenage boys were already carrying boxes toward my porch without asking where anything should go. Nolan stepped outside and started helping them before I even said a word. That was the moment I realized this wasn't an emergency. It was a plan. Then I noticed the object sitting inside the rented trailer hitched behind Carter's SUV. It wasn't luggage. It was a 6-foot solid oak dining table, wrapped in moving blankets. Behind it were mattresses, bicycles, storage bins, bookshelves, and enough furniture to fill an entire house. Nobody packs like that for a weekend. My sister smiled when she caught me staring. "We figured we'd bring everything now instead of making 2 trips, she said casually. 2 trips. My heart skipped. I asked, "How long exactly are you planning to stay?" She laughed as if I'd asked the funniest question in the world. "Until we find the perfect place. You wouldn't want your only sister paying for some tiny apartment when you have all this space." Before I could answer, Carter wheeled a television straight into my living room while Nolan quietly held the door open for him. I felt something inside me shift. I'd spent years interviewing people who lied about money for a living, and every single one of them shared the same habit. They acted like the decision had already been made. If nobody challenged it immediately, they treated silence as permission. Bryn was doing exactly the same thing. Within an hour my guest room had stopped looking like a guest room. Their clothes filled the closet. Family photos were sitting on my dresser. My kitchen counters disappeared beneath grocery bags they hadn't paid for. Then Bryn walked upstairs carrying a framed picture of her family and hung it on the hallway wall without even asking. I didn't say anything. I simply watched. People always reveal their real intentions when they believe they've already won. That evening, while everyone laughed around my dining table as though they'd lived there for years, I quietly opened my laptop and searched for one document I'd promised myself I would never need. By the time I found it, I realized this wasn't going to be a fight over a guest room anymore. It was going to become something much bigger. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because the house was noisy, but because it no longer felt like mine. Every laugh drifting down the hallway reminded me that nobody had actually asked for permission. They had simply acted as if permission was automatic. Around 6 the next morning, I walked down to the dock with a mug of coffee and watched the mist roll across Lake Coeur d'Alene. For a few minutes, the water was perfectly still, and I tried convincing myself I was overreacting. Then my phone buzzed. It was a fraud alert from one of the financial databases I still had access to through my consulting license. At first, I almost ignored it. The notification wasn't about me directly. It mentioned an address I recognized instantly, my lake house. My pulse quickened. I opened my laptop right there on the dock and logged into the county property records. Nothing had changed on the deed. My name was still the only one listed. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I noticed something else. 3 days earlier, someone had requested a certified copy of my property's ownership records. I hadn't requested it. My attorney hadn't requested it either. Someone else had. I quietly closed the laptop and walked back inside. Everyone was eating breakfast like one happy family. Bryn was already talking about repainting the downstairs guest room. Carter was measuring the wall beside the fireplace with a tape measure. Nolan looked up at me for barely a second before returning to his eggs. Nobody noticed I wasn't listening anymore. I only had one question. Who had requested those documents, and why? Later that afternoon, I drove into town without telling anyone where I was going. The clerk at the Kootenai County Recorder's office recognized the property immediately after I gave her the parcel number. She disappeared into the back room and returned with a printed request log. One name appeared beside the document request. Carter Holloway. My brother-in-law. The request had been filed 48 hours before they even arrived at my house. I thanked the clerk, folded the paper into my purse, and sat in my truck for almost 10 minutes without starting the engine. Carter hadn't requested ownership records because he was curious. People don't research someone else's property before moving in unless they're planning something. My job had taught me that paperwork almost always comes before betrayal. When I got back to the house, another surprise was waiting. A pickup truck was parked beside the garage, and 2 contractors were unloading lumber. Bryn waved excitedly from the porch. "Oh, perfect," she called. "They're just here to give us an estimate." I frowned. An estimate for what? She smiled as though the answer were obvious. "For converting your boathouse into our private guest suite." Then she said something that made every warning bell in my head explode. "Don't worry. Nolan already told us you'd come around." I stood there looking at Bryn, then at Nolan, then at the contractors carrying measuring tapes through my backyard as if they already owned the place. For a second nobody spoke. The only sound was the water hitting the dock behind the house. Finally, I looked straight at Nolan. "You told them what?" He rubbed the back of his neck instead of looking at me. "I just said you'd probably be okay with it, eventually." Eventually. That one word told me everything I needed to know. He hadn't defended my home. He'd negotiated it. The lead contractor interrupted the silence. "Ma'am, we're just taking measurements for permits. Nothing starts until the owner signs." I smiled politely. "Good." Then I looked directly at Bryn. "Because nobody's signing anything today." Her smile disappeared for the first time all weekend. "Oh, Tessa, don't make this awkward." Awkward. That was the word people used when they wanted you to ignore your own boundaries. I thanked the contractors for coming, apologized for the misunderstanding, and handed each of them $50 for their time before sending them home. Bryn waited until their truck disappeared down the road. "You embarrassed us." "No," I answered calmly. "I interrupted your plan." Nobody spoke during dinner that night. The silence felt heavier than any argument. Around midnight, after everyone had gone upstairs, I carried my laptop onto the porch and called someone I hadn't spoken to in almost a year. Her name was Marisol Grant, a real estate attorney in Spokane who specialized in property fraud and occupancy disputes. After listening for 15 minutes, she asked one simple question. Did anyone ever sign a lease? No. Did you invite them to live there permanently? No. Perfect. She paused. Then tomorrow morning you stop treating this like a family disagreement. You start treating it like a property matter. Those words changed everything. By 8 o'clock Monday morning, every adult in the house was sitting around my dining table. The same table they had claimed before asking permission. I placed 3 folders in front of them. One for Bryn. One for Carter. One for Nolan. Bryn opened hers first. Inside was a written 30-day occupancy agreement. Monthly rent. Utility costs. House rules. A clause prohibiting renovations. Another clause stating that failure to sign required immediate departure before sunset. She laughed. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. Carter opened his folder next. His smile disappeared immediately. Behind the agreement was a copy of his request for my property records from the county office. His name was highlighted in yellow. I know you requested my ownership documents before you arrived. Nobody moved. Then I slid one final page across the table. A timeline. Every phone call. Every text. Every contractor visit. Every photo I'd quietly taken since they arrived. Years of investigating financial fraud had taught me one lesson. Documentation wins arguments that emotions never can. Finally, Nolan opened his folder. There was no lease inside. No legal paperwork. Just a printed screenshot of a text message. His message. Sent to Bryn 3 days before that first phone call. Don't worry. Once you're here, Tessa won't kick family out. She never does. The room went completely silent. He stared at the page like he'd never seen it before. I had recovered it from our shared tablet after he'd forgotten to delete the cloud backup. Bryn slowly turned toward him. You told us this would work. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time all weekend, nobody expected me to explain myself. I simply stood up. I bought this house because I wanted peace. I looked at my sister. You confused kindness with ownership. Then I looked at Nolan. And you confused love with access. I picked up my keys. You have until 6 tonight. When I came back from town that evening, the driveway was empty. No SUVs. No trailer. No contractors. Just tire tracks leading back toward the highway. On the kitchen counter sat a single envelope. Inside was one handwritten sentence from Bryn. I honestly thought you'd never say no. I folded the note. Placed it inside the same folder with every receipt, photograph, and document from that weekend. And locked it in my office safe. Because people always ask if I regret choosing a house over my family. The truth is, I never chose the house. I chose the one thing I'd spent too many years giving away without realizing it. The right to decide who gets a key to my life.